Today we're continuing Stone Cold from exactly where we left off. So, daily routine orders 5. It's begun, the recruiting, and it was as easy as falling off a log. I didn't even have to go far. My flat, mine and Sappho's, in Mornington's Place, and I found my first recruit in a doorway near Camden Station. A mile, if that, mind you. It was a filthy night. Cold, wet, and windy. Cut straight through you, that wind. I was wearing a parka, stormproof over-trousers, and strong boots, and I was still perished. What must he have felt like in damp, tatty denim? I shudder to think. It was 1:30. So he'd probably been there an hour or two, freezing his tabs off. And that's why he came so easy. What I did was, I squatted down in front of him and said, "What's up, mate? Down on your luck?" I smiled as I said this, my best do-gooder smile. I was prepared for a possible rebuff. I mean, he might have been deeply suspicious, thought I was a woofter or something, but it didn't seem to cross his mind. Half daft with cold. Probably, anyway. He opened his eyes and looked at me and frowned and mumbled, "Who are you?" He was Scottish. Oh, sorry. "Who are you?" Me? I gave him a smile again. Shelter's my name. I run the local hostel on Plender Street. That got him. Hostel? Hostel? He says. What sort of hostel? That's not Scottish. What sort of hostel? For young people, I said. The Townhouse Project. You might have heard of us. He wouldn't because we didn't exist. I made the whole thing up. Name and everything. Part of my preparation. He fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Any chance of a bed? He says. Bite to eat? I shook my head. In the rueful gesture I practiced in the mirror. Not tonight, I'm afraid. Full up. Might be something tomorrow if you get there early. Ah, he says, and the light goes out of his eyes. He's thinking about the long, cold hours ahead. I let him ponder the prospect for a bit, then said, casual-like, "There's a comfy couch at my place if you don't mind." Roughin' it. Brilliant touch, that. And it worked. You sure? He says. The light's back. I can see his little brain working. He's thinking, this guy runs a hostel, warm beds, grub, it gets full. But if I'm with him, I'm in, right? You sure? He says. I gave him a smile again. Sure, no prob. Just round the corner. Come on. And that's all there was to it. I strode out and he trotted at my heels like a ruddy poodle. It was pissing it down and he was sodden by the time we reached the flat. I introduced Sappho, showed him the bathroom, told him to strip off. Threw in some stuff I got for the purpose. Thick sweaters, cord trousers, the sort of stuff do-gooders wear, and went off to heat some tomato soup. And while he was sitting on the sofa, scoffing it, I slipped up behind him and put him out of his misery. Cruel? I don't think so. He's neither cold nor hungry now. Nobody wanted him, so nobody will miss him. And there's one less dosser to clutter the place up. Who loses? I've seen lots of movies where the character who's on the road picks up casual work in towns he's passing through, washing dishes, cutting firewood, sweeping. I couldn't believe that in a city the size of London it might be impossible for a guy to find that sort of work. I mean, the place is packed with restaurants, cafes, and kebab houses, not counting all the pubs. During my 2 weeks in Wharfdale Road, I must have tried 200 of them, starting with those in the King's Cross area. I got nowhere at all. As the days passed, I widened the area of my search, and by halfway through the second week, I'd been as far north as St. John's Wood, and south into Lambeth. I'd tramped the narrow streets of Soho and the boulevards of South Kensington from early morning. I thought potential employees might be impressed by my willingness to be out and about early, till late at night. I'd offered my services in sleazy, greasy cafes and posh hotels and everything in between, till my feet felt bruised and I could hardly drag myself out of bed in morning. I walked everywhere to save money. I lived on cheese rolls and tea, but I was down to 9 quid and some change when Ratface came for his rent. It was Friday night, 8 o'clock. I'd just got in. The room was freezing cold, and I was treating myself to a quick burst of the cash-gobbling electric fire before bed, when there was a knock on the door. I opened up, and it was him. He said 2 words, evening and rent. I looked at him. It's only Friday, I said. I'm paid until Monday. He shook his head. Friday's rent day, sunshine. But I moved in on Monday, I protested, and paid 2 weeks. That makes the room mine until Sunday night. He moved so quickly I hadn't time to step back. 1 second, there was a yard of space between us, and the next, he had a bunch of my shirt in his fist, and his face was an inch from mine. Listen, sunshine, he hissed. The room's mine. I make the rules around here, and the rent's due. If you've got it, pay up. If you haven't, I've got you 5 minutes to pack your stuff and get out. He shoved me and followed me in, leaving the door open. I tried to reason with him, told him I was waiting a decision by the DSS. He laughed. You're waiting, son, he snarled. I'm not. I said I was looking for work and pointed out that I'd been quiet and kept the room tidy. I didn't know what I was saying, really. I was that desperate, but it was no good. He told me to pack my bag and stood there with his arms folded while I did it. Then when I'd finished, I brushed past him on my way to the door and said, I'll have you for this, sooner or later. One way or another, I'll have you. His laughter rang in my ears as I went down the stairs. And that's how I came to join them. The homeless kids I'd seen everywhere in my travels. The kids I'd given change to a week ago when I thought things were bound to work out. I was one of them now, poised at the top of that downward spiral. Daily routine, orders 6. Sorry, I'm just going to open up the window. Because even though it's winter, it's still boiling. Daily routine, orders 6. Time for a brief discourse on the subject of killing. Killing humans. Murder, not to put too fine a point on it. Oh yes, that's what they'd call it if they ever found out about it, which they won't. Murder, the deliberate killing by a human being of another human being. But you see, I was trained to kill. As a soldier, it was my chief function to kill. Waste, do in, whichever you want to call it. Those among my fellow humans whose activities happen to displease the powers that be in my country. And this is where the confusion arises. This is where distinctions get a bit blurred. The killing by a soldier of the enemies of his country is not murder. They don't jail you for it. In fact, if you do it really well, they give you a medal. So why, if I'm disposing of these druggy dossers whose activities are dragging the country down, am I a murderer? It's all nonsense. I'm not a murderer at all. I'm a soldier out of uniform, killing for his country. Trouble is that because the country doesn't approve of the whole thing becomes a hole and corner affair. You've got to hide what you're doing, and that brings us to the hard part, which is disposing of the body. You see, soldiers in uniform, don't have this problem. They don't have to conceal the bodies of their victims. Quite the reverse, in fact. They lay 'em out in rows, count 'em, and take snapshots of 'em, like shooting parties used to do with pheasant. Only difference is, they don't eat 'em. They shove 'em in a big hole and bury 'em, and that's that. No problem. Everyone knows they're there. Nobody cares. But if you're out of uniform like me, if you're what they call a murderer, you've got to get rid of the body. And that's a real worry because, believe it or not, it's far and away the hardest bit of the whole job. Killing's easy, dead easy, especially if you've been trained to do it. Though, of course, anyone can do it if they put their mind to it. But more murderers have come unstuck because they made a mess of disposing the body than through any other cause. It's a fact. Everything's been tried. Acid baths, dismemberment, cement boots, and a deep river, everything. And more often than not, it's no use. The body, or parts of it, turn up sooner or later, and the killer is caught. I won't be. No, because unlike most so-called murderers, I've planned in advance. My flat's on the ground floor, and there's a handy little space. Quite a big space, actually, under the floorboards. It's beautifully ventilated. Stick your hand down there and you feel the draw, so it'll stay cool, even on the warmest day. That's important. I won't go into why, because it's not a pleasant subject. Let's just say bodies in a warm place have a way of betraying their presence after a day or two. So, I've got this place. I like to think of it as my built-in refrigerator, and that's where our little friend of last night now lies. As I have said, he doesn't feel the cold, nor is he cluttering up anyone's doorway. The whole thing's so much tidier, don't you think? I found a doorway, a good deep one, so deep that light from the street lamps and shop fronts didn't reach the door itself, and you could sit with your back against it and not be seen by passers-by. It was 9 o'clock, and cold. I sat on my bedroll with my backpack between my feet, watching the bright, narrow rectangle of movement and color at the end of my little tunnel. People passed continuously, but nobody glanced my way. I knew nobody. Nobody knew I was there. Across the street, I could see subway railings with a new vendor's pitch, a road junction, and part of King's Cross Station. I sat thinking about my rat-faced former landlord who couldn't spell negotiation, about how one day I'd catch him unawares in the dark alleyway, and about the inventive and wondrous things I'd do to him there. I was angry and a bit shaken, I suppose, but I wasn't particularly unhappy. Not then. My anonymity was a comfort. At least I wasn't going to be seen by people who knew me. Also, I was one among many. My plight could have no curiosity value for anybody who might spot me, and there was no further need to fret about next week's rent. I felt free, I suppose. This was before I became acquainted with some of the setbacks, like hunger pangs and real cold, and the problem of what to do when you have to go to the lavatory and guard your bedroom at the same time. It was this last one which got me first and lost me in my doorway and more besides. As I've said, I found a lovely doorway around 9 o'clock, and for a time it was okay sitting there, watching the world go by. In fact, it was quite pleasant in a way. But by 11, my feet and legs were cold. I was tired. My bedroll was giving me a numb bum, and I was dying for a pee. I saw no problem, though. The station was just across the way. There'd be toilets in there somewhere. All I had to do was stroll across. The numbness would go, and the walk would warm me up. Of course, I'd have to take my stuff. If I left it back here in the dark, it might be all right. But you can't take that sort of chance when your bedroll and backpack are all you have in this world. So 11:15, I got up and toted my stuff across to the station. The gents turned out to be halfway down platform 1, but there was no barrier, so I motored on down, passing some down and outs sitting on benches. The place was underground. I trotted down the steps, beginning to relax like you do when you know relief is imminent, and hit snag 1. At the foot of the stairs was a turnstile, 10 pence. I dropped my roll and fished in my pockets a 50, 2 20s, and some copper. No 10. There was a glass box, a sort of office, so there must be an attendant. I called out, an attendant. I called out, "Excuse me." My predicament was becoming acute. There was no answer. Nothing stirred. I glanced all around, chucked my roll over the stile, and followed it. The relief was terrific. Halfway through, the door of a cubicle opened, and out popped a runty little guy of about 50, with a peaked cap and a fag hanging out of his gob. "'Ere," he croaked. "Have you paid?" No, I stammered. He'd made me splash my trainers. I don't give a toss what you haven't got, son." He was really hoarse. 60 a day, man. I could probably push him over with one hand. I'd been about to ask him to change 20 pence, but his attitude upset me. I decided I'd vault the stile and save myself 10p. I've no dosh, I told him, zipping up. He stood in front of the turnstile. You don't leave till you've paid. His fag wagged up and down as he spoke. That's like a cigarette, by the way. I'm just reading what it says on the page. I'm not saying the other meaning of that word. Sifting ash down his front. I looked at him. Get out the way, old man. He shook his head. More ash. I moved towards him, swinging my roll. He dodged and swung an inept punch at my head. I ducked, shoved him aside, and vaulted the stile. I felt terrific, streetwise and tough. But I daren't linger in the station. I pictured him in his glass box, phoning the railway police. I hurried up the platform and out to the street. When I got back to my doorway, somebody was there. I didn't see him till I kicked his foot. He leapt up, a 6-footer, as wide as the door. What's your problem, whack? I was here first. God, what a stupid thing to say. He poked me in the chest. Sod off, kiddo, before I drop you. But I've been here 2 hours, I protested. I just went in the station for a... Sod off, now! I knew I'd have to go too. This was no chain-smoking run you could knock down with a feather. This guy was what I'd been kidding myself I'd become. A streetwise tough. I turned away with a lump in my throat. I felt like I'd spend the rest of my life being pushed around. It's not fair, I choked. What a wally I was. Fair? If I'd gone straight away, he might not have spotted the watch on my wrist. But he did. He grabbed my sleeve. Nice watch, Gizzit. No. The watch was my last treasure. A present from Mum before Vince came on the scene. I tried to pull away, but he tightened his grip. Gizzit, if you don't want your face smashed in... I thought about calling for help. There were plenty of people passing, but I guess I knew it would do no good. Who's gonna risk a fist or a knife to help a dosser? I took off the watch and handed it over. It was a struggle not to burst into tears. He grinned. Ta. Whack. Very nice of you. Now piss off. I went. Reading this. I never thought I'd be getting tired reading a book. Okay, anyway. Daily routine orders 7. I think this will be the last one I do, just because I'm like, you know? It's like parachuting. Get the first jump over, and it becomes routine. You mustn't get complacent. Check your equipment every time. Run through procedures. Know what's what. Don't fall into any traps. There's a trap serial killers fall into, namely the trap of pattern. There's something the same about each of their killings, and this tells the law that it's the same person doing them. It also helps the police by saying something about the killer. For example, if all his victims are Mexican, they know they're probably looking for a bloke who hates Mexicans. If all the bodies are found in underground stations, they're after someone who hangs around underground stations. It's a trap, see? A trap of the killer's own making, because it narrows the field. I've got to be particularly careful about this. I can't help making a pattern, because all of my citizens are dossers, bound to be. Of course, they're not going to find the bodies in underground stations or anywhere else. I'm not that daft, but there is this unavoidable pattern, so what I have to do is create as much variety as possible without straying beyond the borders of my appointed task. Last night's piece of business differed from its predecessor in several respects. For one thing, my client was a female. I didn't select her because I like women or because I hate them. I can't take them or leave them. As a matter of fact, I chose her because the last one was male. That's all. And I didn't pick her up by the Camden Tube, because that's another pattern. I rode down to Piccadilly Circus and strolled right round Soho, and I spotted her coming out of the Regent Palace. Manky she was. You could see the grime on her neck from across the road. And there she was, stepping out of the hotel, like a bleeding duchess or something. She sneaked into the inn to use the toilets, of course. But now she'd got past security, I don't know. But how she got past security, I don't know. Anyway, I let her get a little way down the road before tapping her on the shoulder. Excuse me, she spun around. Yes? Hotel security, I snapped. Regent Palace. Well, I looked the part in my suit and trench coat. You were in the hotel just now, weren't you? She nodded. There was a look in her eyes like a hunted animal. Yes, I went to the toilet. Why? There's been a series of thefts, and I'm afraid I must ask you to return with me to the hotel. Thefts? She looked desperate. I don't know anything about thefts, I told you. I needed the toilet. I was only there for a minute. Poor cow, looking as she did, she must have stuck out like a sore thumb in there. She wouldn't have lasted long enough to commit a theft. I'm sorry, I said, but you must come with me and answer some questions. It won't take long. Oh, God. She bit her lip. Look, I'm in enough trouble as it is. I'm homeless. I have no jobs and no money. I've nothing on me. Can't you just search me or something and let me go? She was close to tears, as they say in the Bodice Rippers. I judged it was time to pull my masterstroke. I eyed her up and down, speculatively. Wouldn't mind searching you. At that, I purred. This guy's a creep. Homeless, you say? She nodded. I couldn't see the dawn of hope in her eyes. Nasty night too. How'd you fancy spending it in a cozy flat? I was brilliant. Nice warm bed? What d'you mean? She knew what I meant. I smiled, and she said, You mean you want me to... I shrugged. It was just a thought, Petal. You get off the hook as a suspect, and I smiled again. Oh. She hesitated, but it didn't take her long to see how poor her alternatives were. She probably believed I'd fit her up on a theft charge if she opted to come the Puritan. She nodded, looking down, and mumbled, Okay. The rest was simple. Taxi back to my place, Sappho, dry clothing, tomato soup, eternal oblivion. They looked so sweet, the two of them side by side, that I kept going down for another look. I must be getting soft. I trudged along Pentonville Road, peering into doorways and the entrances to office blocks. My left wrist felt naked without the watch, and I added the Scouser to my hit list. Ratface and the Scouser. I was going to turn into a serial killer if I went out at this rate. Yeah, you only need one more. You only need 3 murders to be a serial killer. After a bit, I came to the doorway, which was both deep and unoccupied. I dodged into it and stood there, wondering whether I dare doss down. What if this was somebody's bedroom too? Somebody big like the Scouser. Suppose he showed up and took a fancy to my pack, my bedroll, and demanded them. Or he might just knife me and take them. On the other hand, it was now pretty late. Though, of course, I didn't know what time exactly. Surely, I told myself, if somebody dossed here regularly, he'd be here by now. Anyway, I was dead tired. I had to get my head down somewhere, and wherever I went, there was gonna be this same doubt. So I just wriggled into my sleeping bag and dropped my head on the pack. When he arrived, I heard these footsteps and thought, keep going, go past, please go past. But he didn't. The footsteps stopped, and I knew he was looking down at me. I opened my eyes. He was just a shadow framed in the doorway. This your place? I croaked. Stupid question. He was going to say yes even if I wasn't right. What I should have said was piss off. I wondered how big he was. No, you're right, mate. He sounded laid back, amiable. Just shove up a bit so I can spread my roll. I obliged, and he settled himself beside me. So close we were almost touching. It felt good to be with someone. Now if anybody else turned up, it wouldn't matter. There would be 2 of us. I felt I ought to say something, so I said, Been doing this long? Hoping he wouldn't be offended. 6, 7 months, he said. You? First night. He chuckled. I can tell. Where you from? Up north. Brum me. I can tell. It was a risk. Oh, Brum, me. I can tell. It was a risk, this crack about his accent, but he only chuckled again. Name's Ginger, he said, and waited. A friend! A homeless friend! I didn't want to give my name, not to anybody. Clean break, right? Fresh start. And anyway, he hadn't told me his. Ginger's only a nickname. Link, I said. I seen this signpost earlier. Thames Link. It's a railway. Oh, eh? He said, meaning, I don't believe... Oh, eh? He said, meaning, I don't believe you, but it's not heavy. It's that funny word again. Got a cigarette on you, Link? Don't smoke. For once I wish I did. He laughed again. You will. How'd you mean? Been hungry, have you? I mean, really hungry? No? No? Well, when you are, smoking helps. Dulls the pain a bit. Ah. You hungry now, Ginger? Bit. Why, you got grub? Got a Snicker in my pack. Do you want it? Don't you? No, not hungry. This wasn't completely true, but I thought perhaps I'd found a friend, and I wanted to hang on to him. I opened my pack and groped about till I found the bar. God, just use normal words, please, author. Robert what's your name? Robert something? Here. Ta, mate. What does ta mean? Sure you don't want it? No. Half? No, you eat it. I buckled my pack and lay there with my eyes closed, listening to him eat. He was pretty hungry at that. You could tell. When he finished, he said, S better. G'night, Link. Night, Ginger. And that's how I met Ginger. I must have slept, but because the next thing I knew, somebody was nudging me none too gently in the back, saying, Come on, sunshine, let's have you. I opened my eyes and instantly screwed them shut as a torchlight lanced into them. My first thought was that Ginger had changed his mind and wanted me out of his bedroom. But then my mind cleared and I knew it was the police. Oh, I thought it was going to be the landlord. Just like being a dick for no reason. I sat up. It was still dark and bitterly cold as I began to peel off my sleeping bag. There were two officers, a man and a woman. Once they'd got us awake, they stood back and watched while we rolled our bags up and strapped them to our packs. Don't forget that, grunted the guy, shining his torch on the screwed-up wrapper from my Snicker. Ginger picked it up and shoved it in his pocket. I thought they were going to arrest us or something, but as soon as we were packed and on our feet, they moved off, shining their torches into doorways as they went. What time is it? I asked, as we stood dazed with the cold and sleep in the orange light of a street lamp. God, I can't read! Ginger shook his head. Dunno, about 6 probably. Why'd they do that? Get us up, I mean. Why? He grimaced. We were in someone's doorway. Wouldn't do for the owner or tenant or whoever to find us here when he came to open up, would it? I couldn't think of any answer to that, so I said, What now? He looked at me. You got any money? I nodded. 9 quid and some change. Fancy a coffee? Bite to eat? Not half. I was starving. You? He smiled. You don't have to feed me, you know. Just 'cause we shared a doorway, folks like us, we've got to look after number one. And don't tell anybody else you've got 9 quid, you won't have it long. We went to an all-night kebab house he knew about. It was warm and glaringly bright inside. It smelled so good I practically drooled. The wall on the clock said 6:20. We were the only customers. We bolted doner and slurped coffee and talked. Ginger asked me what I planned to do. I told him I was looking for work while waiting for the DSS to come back to a decision about my case. When I told him what I'd told them about my circumstances, he shook his head. Wasted time, mate. Foregone conclusion. They'll say you made yourself homeless because you left your mum's place voluntarily. You mean I get no benefit? Nothing? Not a sausage, mate. You could take it from me. I've seen it too many times. But if I don't find work, if it takes a while, how am I supposed to live? He laughed. Any way you can, Link, old son. Nobody cares, see? Nobody gives a toss. That's the first thing you've got to learn. He smiled. Why do you think so many kids beg the punters for change? 'Cause they like it? I shook my head. Is that what you do? Beg? Yup. All day, every day. And sometimes I don't make the price of a sandwich. Do most people refuse then? Oh, hey. He smiled again. Do you know what a soul credulist is? No. A soul credulist is someone who believes what he reads in The Sun. And do you know what the Sun says? The Sun and 3 or 4 other tabloids? I shook my head. Well, I'll tell you. They say us kids aren't homeless at all. That we trick the punters out of their change all day and go home to our mums at night with 40, 50 quid in our pockets, and it all goes on drink and drugs. They don't. They bloody do, you know. All the soul credulists believe 'em, and all. That's why they refuse. But it's a lie, I cried. There ought to be a law against it. True, he laughed. But there won't be, though. It's what they call freedom of the press. I looked at him. So when my dosh runs out, I'll be begging too, huh? I wouldn't wait till it runs out, mate. Like I said, some days you'll make sod all. I'd start today if I was you. We lingered in the warmth of breakfast time. Customers began drifting, and the proprietor started giving us dirty looks. Come on, said Ginger. We don't want to outstay our welcome, or he'll bar us. He got up and shouldered his pack. There's a nice washroom through the back here. I'll show you. We used the washroom and left the kebab house just as it was starting to get light. I tagged along with Ginger through the early rush, hoping he'd let me stick with him today. I had a feeling he knew a lot of stuff. I'd just need to learn, if I was to survive in this great cold jungle. God, how long is this chapter, dude? No, I'm not reading all this. I'm done. There's like 3 more pages in this chapter. Bye-bye. I'll continue where I left off next time.